I give a fuck? Why do I give a fuck? Why do I try so hard? Why do I care so much?
Welcome to Why Do I Give a Fuck? A cross-cultural conversation between myself, Diane Tate,
and Johanna Thompson. In these times of great struggle and possible shift, we ask ourselves,
why do we give a fuck about any of it? How does the lens we see the world through impact what we see?
And what do we do about it? During our last episode, you communicated that there was a certain amount of jealousy that you were experiencing as watching the folks who were indoctrinated into Zionism were becoming aware of that level of indoctrination. And you expressed a little bit of jealousy around that. And we said that we were going to unpack it a little bit more deeply. And I'm interested in what that unpacking process looked like for you.
Well, I think to that end, maybe we should listen just to the ending of the last episode just to refresh people's memories of where we left off. And then we can get into a deeper level of unpacking. And I also think it's good to let folks know that we had this conversation back in January. This episode and the previous episode, the content was all had back in January. And so in this moment, in real time, we're watching the student uprisings and the college campuses erupt with their encampments and protesting and demanding that their universities divest from support. And all of that is intertwined with this dialogue, but not necessarily reflective in this dialogue because we did have this conversation a few months ago. So just wanted to speak that in.
Yeah, I definitely think it's a very timely conversation, even though we did record it back in January because of those uprisings. And I do want to add that as a alumni of Columbia, I do stand in support with the students because one of the things that Columbia did teach us is that you don't take no for an answer. You kind of just get this, oh, you must not have understood me. Let me explain to you again. And so being able to see the young people on campus embodying that and on the campuses across the globe, I believe that this conversation that we're having is directly aligned with what we're seeing happening in current movement because it does speak to how people are engaging and internalizing the genocide that's happening in Gaza.
We'll start with just kind of revisiting what I said in the last one that sparked the next dialogue, and then we'll weave into the unpacking. There's a compassion for them that as a white woman, I wish I could enjoy. The circles that I've been hearing around me unpacking my whiteness has had very little empathy for me in my indoctrination into whiteness, which I get, totally understand. But if I'm being honest, yeah, I wish I could feel a little bit of that, and feel it for myself, because I feel like the waking up to that indoctrination is similar, but maybe it's not. Just wanted to speak that into the ether for another twist in the process.
I'm curious for more clarification in what you're speaking to. What I believe that I'm hearing is that as you are waking to the realities of what the power that whiteness holds, right, in America, there was not the same compassion that is occurring in this moment for people of Jewish faith who are recognizing the harmfulness of Zionist ideologies and notions because of the way that we are witnessing genocide in the name of what now has been labeled Zionism being the power structure that is causing this genocide.
Yeah.
If we're thinking about an environment in retaliation to Hamas, who advanced this really violent on October 7th.
Yeah.
And so, and what is the compassion that you are observing that you are missing in your experience?
Well, there's a movie out that I don't know if you've seen called Israelism. It was on Netflix, but it got taken down after October 7th. It was filmed back in 2017, and it was made by Jewish people, was produced by Jewish people, and it focuses on folks who are unpacking their own indoctrination into Zionism. And that, this is long before October 7th. So this has been an ongoing thing. This has been happening for quite some time. where people who are raised to believe that Zionism is synonymous with Judaism, that if you are a person of Jewish faith, you must believe that Israel is your rightful place in the world and that there was nobody there of any consequence when you came to the land, and that you have the right to take whatever you want, and that Palestinians are animals and dehumanized and all of that. That's what I'm understanding is the indoctrination that many Jewish people experience from birth on up. And so it followed these select few young people who are waking up to their own indoctrination and are saying, this isn't okay. It's not okay for us to take this land. And there's a real, like, I just watched one of the people that are highlighted in this movie just did an interview on Democracy Now! The other day, and she was talking about the movie and she was talking about her journey. And there's a real compassion for how hard it must be. You're losing family. Does this make it difficult for you to have friends? All of the things that I've experienced as a white person, I've lost friends, I've lost family. I identify very clearly with what she's going through and what she's having these conversations about since her denouncement of Zionism, and certainly since she's been profiled in this movie. And there's a whole conversation about, isn't that hard? What is that like for you? And that's not the same conversation for people, or at least in my experience. I want to say that saying all of this out loud sounds ridiculous to me because I'm centering myself, and I totally get that. I totally get that. I know this is a safe space, and I know you know my heart. But I do want to say that I know this sounds stupid, that I want compassion about waking up to my whiteness, because if the Jewish people can get it, then why can't I get it? I totally get how stupid that sounds. But I want to just say, I think I want to say into the space that this is real. This interior war that I have in myself, and that I think other white people do have in themselves, about, Jesus, why did it take me so long to wake up to this? And I can't believe I perpetuated this most of my life. And, all of those tormenting things that we do in our heads when we're waking up to our whiteness. I don't know. I guess I just want to be real and say that watching people who identify as Jewish waking up to their Zionism and getting a pat on the back feels a little crappy.
Well, let me hearing that and appreciating how you're able to identify how it sounds like centering yourself. I'm going to offer a additional layer that people of Jewish faith get to hold, which is the Holocaust. Whereas, white folks coming from Mayflower descendancy, or who I just identify with whiteness in general, have never had to experience genocide in any of the history of, there's been wars that have
Agreed.
occurred,
No,
because
agreed.
of religion, but
Yeah.
there's a different level of particular targeting because of your beliefs.
That trauma's not there, that trauma base.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that comes from a different place. And all of us waking up to our positions of privilege, because me as a Black identified woman, recognizing in this moment that I'm an American,
Mhm.
and as an American, we are the ones that actually sanction this level of violence,
Mhm.
right? And waking up to, that's my reality, regardless of what my identity label
Right.
is that I am an actual participant of this genocide and violence. While the genocide and violence that's happening across the water is bombing, and we are getting to see like buildings falling down, and the same type of bombing and targeting has happened to Black Americans throughout the history of the United States. And so when October 7th happened, I was less interested in hearing what the media was saying about it, because I knew that it wouldn't hold actual truths
Right.
about what the actual struggle and conflict was. And the awareness that's happening with folks who have been indoctrinated into Zionism. And let's define Zionism. Zionism is, the way that I'm speaking about it is really a hyperalized commitment to Israel's existence to the detriment and harm of other people's existence. So I believe that Israel should definitely have its existence, have its autonomy, have its all of the things. And I believe that for all people, as long as there's no harm to yourself or others, it's like the basic human thing. Like as long as
Right.
you're not harming yourself and others,
Yeah.
then please be in your self-determination and your autonomy. And how can we move forward and be able to do that?
Yeah.
Um, and so when October 7th happened, and I did see on the news because I was like, wait, what's going on? And so you want to visualize and see the picture. So in that moment, I did turn on the news. I did see, you know, and being realistic, I was like, yeah, finally the oppressed is rising up. Like,
Yeah.
we're not gonna let you do this after 30 years. We're done. We finished with this, which is also one of the fears that's like, an undertone on US soil, right? Is
Yeah.
that at some point those who are oppressed are gonna be like, enough of this,
We're done.
and
Yeah.
and and have a responsiveness that hasn't been the case in over 400 years. I mean, it's probably not like the sentiment of a majority of humans, but you do have these moments of at some point I'm not going to let you violate, abuse, limit my mobility, take my freedom, say that I'm a lesser human being than you. There, you do get to this place. And so on October 7th, when I visually saw what was happening on the news, and so I'm looking, but I'm not really listening because I know it's going to be full of crap. And I was disheartened in my gut to the point where I couldn't watch it. Like,
Mhm.
and I couldn't continue on with it. It was just way too difficult. It's way too difficult to go out in the streets because I feel a level of hypocrisy with that. It's too difficult in my algorithm scroll to like I did try to hear what people of Jewish faith were talking about in regards to it. I even looked up some writing from, I guess, what people might identify as Zionist humans as to how they were having conversations about this. Like there's a actual document that says this is how, if you're going to speak on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, how you should speak on it if you were being in consideration with people of Jewish faith. So I looked at those things to try to have an understanding. And for me, it just kept on coming back to those with power are going to continue to grab at their power to the harm of themselves because there's no recognition of you holding this place of power, how you're actually harming yourself because you're limiting yourself from like the fullness of life experience, and you're going to be living in fear because you've created yourself in this power structure. So it's a cycle that you're going to have to continue to hold your positionality.
Right.
And when any bully, like if we're just talking about straight up street politics, any bully who goes in and takes over any type of territory is always going to be in fear of retaliation. So that you're always going to have to live on the defense, which
Mhm.
is not a healthy way to be living.
Right.
So, all right, those are the folks in power. And then there's also those who are being oppressed or who have been retaliated against, who are there is fear that's instilled in that community because you're able to see how much support those in power are getting. And so it really makes the conflict very difficult on how it is that we can get to a more transformative state to find some type of solution to this violence that's happening, to this genocide that's happening. And it's disheartening. It's disheartening because living on US soil, you see that it doesn't change. Those in power hold power. That power lasts through generations of lifetimes. There's rippled effects of that. And then there's a denial of the violence and an erasure of the stories
Yeah. Yes.
about what has occurred. And so that's what I'm sitting. I'm sitting in real time going, generations from now, if we still exist in the way that we exist, which I'm curious as to what that's going to look like,
Yeah.
this story is going to look different than what we are witnessing as a genocide of a group of people. It's going to look like a different story.
Yeah.
It's state sanctioned violence. You're watching power structures. You're watching how much power Zionists hold in the US, which is scary because we call ourselves a democracy, where in the US you have migrant humans that have actually created US with the to the exclusion of the folks that were here before. We don't even call it Turtle Island. If I say Turtle Island, people don't even know what I'm referring to, and
Right.
that being US soil and what the indigenous folks named this land. And that is scary and concerning
Hmm.
more than anything else,
Hmm.
to me in this moment. It's a difficult conversation, it's a complex conversation, and as you said, it's as simplistic as how do we stop people from being murdered, a people from being completely wiped off of existing in a land like there's not enough space for everybody to be.
Yeah. I mean, we are watching the erasure in real time. And I watched the video the other day of the Israelis blowing up the Palestine University, and they imploded it like we would implode a building here that we want to tear down and build something else. And there was a museum, there were artifacts in there. Besides the human life that is so hard to watch being obliterated, just the history of these folks. And I've heard so many indigenous folks in this country speak on the reality of what the so many of the Israeli government talking points is about. Well, we were here longer than the Palestinians, and this has always been our birthright, this land. And the indigenous folk, the voices that I'm listening to in this country, I mean, they're saying it over there too, but in this country, in relation to what we were saying about the comparison between what my ancestors did in colonizing this country, Turtle Island, we're saying, indigenous people don't blow up their trees. They don't, I mean, the olive trees are considered sacred to the Palestinian people. And in the early days of the bombing of Gaza, the trees were targeted, the orchards were decimated intentionally. And just that one phrase of indigenous people don't blow up their land, they don't decimate their trees, they don't, especially ones that are considered sacred. And it's that story, it's that nugget of reality about how no matter how much the oppressors spin the story to say that this is for the greater good of the world, you can't deny when you look at the facts of how they're moving through space and how they are, they blow up a building and then they come in with their bulldozers and they bulldoze it down, knowing that there are humans likely trapped in the rubble, even when they know that there are humans actually in the rubble because they know they were in the building when they blew it up. They intentionally come through with their bulldozers and finish the job, as it were. That's not the act of anyone that is indigenous to any land. So it feels like a lot of the conversations and a lot of the learning that I've been doing is just that unpacking of that storytelling and how the power of storytelling. We've had these conversations before about, the stories that were told after the Civil War, the lost
Mm,
cause,
yeah.
how they rewrote that history. They rewrote the story of that war and what it was about and what it was for, and got into the textbooks and changed the story in the textbooks so that all of the children that were learning from the textbooks would learn the story that they wanted told instead of the story that was real. And we are still feeling the effects of that, and so that's
Mhm.
what I mean by of course, so that sorry, I know I'm preaching to the choir, but there are still white people that look like me in this country that don't know that there was an intentionality behind changing that story in the textbooks, that still don't know that. And they don't know it because the stories got told wrongly, that it worked, over in a lot of ways.
Because
Intentionally.
that's like
Intentionally.
that's what's happening with
Yes.
what I understand folks who are naming this thing Zionism, right? There's an indoctrination that has come
Yep.
so that what would happen in World War II and the genocide to the people of Jewish faith in the European lands would never happen again.
Right.
So for me, it's in that level of indoctrination that then is sanctioning right now
It happening again.
this it happening again. It's just
Yeah.
not to the people who it happened to before.
Yeah.
We sit in this space because we're all complicit in it. right? We're complicit in it in this on this land. If we're sending our young people to school, if we're not fighting back on the erasure of on the things that are coming back, we are also doing this level of indoctrination that we are saying is incorrect with the folks of Jewish faith. And so those are the internal struggles that make me want to figure out how it is that we can come to some solutions to these type of conflicts. Like I'm thinking about when we're learning about the history that's happening in the school, and we're like, I could never sit back and know that a whole bunch of people are being killed,
Mhm.
murdered. And yet the reality is that we are sitting back every single day because people are being killed and murdered
Yes.
for power,
Yes.
and privilege. And that's really all it is. It's a big ass bullying with power and privilege. And it also privileges whiteness, regardless of where
Yes.
you are, like what land you're on. And I'm just curious as to what that's about, regardless of your religious faith, your cultural identity, being Italian, Irish, Russian, whatever. What is that about in whiteness that has to have power and dominion
Mm.
over everything?
I mean, the first word that comes to mind is fear.
Mhm.
And not fear in a, oh, poor thing, you're fearful, but fear of loss of control, that mindset of that there's not enough. I think it's a scarcity mentality. It's a zero sum game. But I also don't want to diminish how it makes people feel powerful. It makes whiteness feel powerful. So that's definitely an element to it as well. Oftentimes, when I think of fear being a driving force, it ultimately feels like it puts that person or that group in a place of, oh, they're really just wounded. And, and I don't mean to diminish, there are large elements of whiteness that simply just wants to be in power and maintain that power at all costs, to the detriment of anyone else around it that doesn't get to identify as part of that group. Um,
Mhm.
and is that an evil? Was I indoctrinated into whiteness, or was I born as a person who will fight for maintaining power at all costs?
Probably a both and, right?
Yeah.
Like you were born into the privilege of it and indoctrinated into it, as we all have been indoctrinated into it. It's funny that you speak about fear, and I always think about like when I'm having conversations addressing the power dynamics within the constructs of whiteness and proximity to whiteness, and then having had the privilege of traveling around and seeing that there's so many more brown people in across the globe than there are white folks. And it makes me curious and wonder if some of that fear is rooted in the fact that whiteness and white culture actually is the minority. And when you're the minority of something,
Mm.
then when your back is up against the wall and you feel like, oh my gosh, the reality is that like there's a whole lot more of them. So how do I maintain my existence? And the best method of maintaining my existence is to exert power and control
Dominant.
and dominion and dominance over everything so that I have a chance.
Yeah.
Um,
I think about white
and
slave
even in
owners.
that,
There was maybe five white people in the house, and
mhm,
maybe 200 enslaved. And the only way to make sure that you don't, die every night is to continue the dominion and to instill, and to break people down so that they don't think they have the kind of power over you that they actually do hold.
which goes back to really what I was saying earlier, that the five people in the house live in fear. Every single night you're going to bed. So then you're in this tension
You got
and
to
you are
maintain.
creating this level of
Yeah.
harm and violence, like internal violence that's happening. That is what I'm seeing manifested across the waters and in Gaza, because there are a whole lot of people, including people within your own family, other people of Jewish faith, who are not supporting this genocide of other
Mhm.
humans,
Mhm.
like in a large and growing mass.
The families of the people that are still held as hostages in Gaza are
Mm-hmm.
protesting,
Mm-hmm.
protesting what BB is doing, protesting the continued bombardment, and saying enough is enough, stop, just stop.
Yeah.
And, BB just put towards the Hamas, he just said, well, we'll cease fire for 2 months if you'll give us back all the hostages. Why
Yeah.
he ever thought that would be something that Hamas would want to take. And people are going to look at that and say, oh, well, Hamas turned it down. So that just means they just want to be. No, it was only for 2 months. And then you're going to turn around. The only
And
leverage they
continue to
have
annihilate.
is the hostages. And so why would they give it? Because they're trying to just survive. I wonder if it's a function of why this keeps happening, is how long that mindset and how long that cortisol has been flooding people's bodies in terms of fear. 400 years, millennia, I
Mm-hmm.
don't know. I don't know what the number is, but if we've been living like that, I mean, was there ever a time on the earth where humans lived next to each other in harmony without warring and without trying to protect themselves from other? I don't know. I mean, I've heard people say that it's tribal, using the term tribalism to talk about, I don't know, when I've heard it used in a way that kind of describes, or at least how it's landed on me, is that it's describing this innate sense of competition, or like it's built into our DNA that we're supposed to war against other factions. And I'm not
Yeah.
buying.
Yeah. That wouldn't be, I think that is a very binary and white
Yeah.
cultured way
Yeah.
of
Look.
thinking and being, which makes sense if you're always living in fear
Yeah.
that you're always going to be in competition with someone else. And whereas other cultural consciousness doesn't speak in that way. I mean, and the reason why power and dominion can happen from, Western civilization is because other communities that they've gone to have welcomed folks in open arms, because you're another human. You might look different and be different, but I'm curious about you. I'm opening my arms, and then that's when, oh yeah, you some more brown people. I found another place with more brown people. Lord have mercy. What am I going to do? Let's kill them all because there's too many of them.
I want to acknowledge that
I'm laughing. It's not funny.
no, it's not. And I
Mhm.
want to acknowledge that you've helped me understand and let go of that moment of whiteness weakness and in feeling jealousy towards the people who were unpacking their Zionism and getting empathy for it. Because you're right, it's not the same thing. And so that's my, I appreciate your compassion and your walking me through that. So
It's being able to have other perspectives, how we come into our understanding of things. Like, and this is why I really enjoy being able to have conversations with you, because we can be authentic about it. We can like say the things that we're feeling. There was no judgment on you expressing that level of jealousy. It was just like well, for me, I observe it as different as to why there would be compassion here and less compassion here. The length of time, the level of impact and experience, and just to be able to share that in a way that is, I'm not going to use safe, but that's what people understand, in a way that's authentic.
yeah,
And this is not easy. We're not people that just met each other off the street to be able to have this conversation, right? This is
no.
like a 2 year, building trust and relationship with one another to be able to be honest and expressive about how we are experiencing things that we both know are happening, but having different ways of coming into our understanding of it.
Why do I give a fuck? Why do
Thanks for
I
joining
give a
us.
fuck?
Until next time,
Why
as you
do I
move
try
throughout
so
your day,
hard?
continue to ask yourself,
Why do I give a
Why Do I Give a Fuck
do
is
I
produced in
give a
collaboration with Johanna and Diane. Music by Norwegian musician
so
Water.
much?
See you next time.
Why do